So please welcome Tom Cronin to the show. Welcome, Tom.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to our chat today.
All the way from Australia. It's Friday. You're in the next day. You know, we always talk about time and it doesn't exist. And you're in my future.
That's right. Yeah, we're one day ahead of America at the moment.
Right. And for the moment.
Yeah, well, I think we're always kind of one day ahead, but I think that it's, as you say, time's just like we're here now, right? So this
Right.
is all we've got.
Exactly. So here I get introduced to Tom Cronin and I go down his rabbit hole and I learn so much. And if after this hour, if people don't meditate, then I don't know. I really don't know, especially people that listen to this that always say, oh, people say to meditate and, oh, it's just to take that time. And, I think where we're at in this world right now and where you've come into my life at this part, um, is definitely, there's no coincidences. And it's just fascinating to listen to your story. And we're about the same age. And it's funny because I graduated in 1987. So I think you're a year ahead of me, right?
No,
86.
1987 was, sorry, 85 I finished school and I started my work as a broker in 1987. I took a year
Okay.
off.
Okay. So I'm thinking and reflecting back at my journey and how at 55 years old, looking back and look at the breadcrumbs that I took and followed the path and followed followed the yellow brick road and saw the Y's in the road and took uh, maybe it didn't lead me down the right way, but I know it's always perfect. So it brings you back to where you're supposed to be. But when I listen to your story and realize, from the higher perspective, what you were truly meant to do here on this earth at this time was exactly what you had to go through to get to that place. And so many people look at life as happening to you when you really look at it now and say, oh my gosh, that was all for me. That is so amazing. And I have two girls and I know you have twins, a boy and a girl that
Yeah,
are they 21, 22? It's hard for
22
me to,
now. That's
22,
okay. Mm.
and mine are 18 and 15. And I just put one to college. So it's also another reflection when you were talking about your path. And it just made me think about her and her choices now as an 18-year-old in college and where her path will lead. And it's just fascinating to know that it all leads to what your purpose, and during that little path of wondering, oh my gosh, this is, what am I doing? But if you could just be at ease knowing it now, and I try to portray that to my daughters, like, it might just follow that passion, follow what leads you. You never know where it's leading you to where you're supposed to be always, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the hardest thing for us to do is to trust the process.
Right.
It's the thing that causes so much fear and angst and anxiety is just that we can't see at that point in time how or why that's happening until sometimes some people never get to see it from retrospect, from looking back, from hindsight. But as we become more conscious, more awake, more aware of the process and trust that process, see that process, we go, oh, now that makes sense.
Right.
And hopefully, as time goes on, we have greater capacity when we're in the next stage that's difficult, that we can see why that's happening and how we can move through that. And quite often, more often than not, when we're in that dark night or that difficult situation, circumstance, we're still questioning, we're still riddled with doubt and uncertainty, but we get better at it over time of being able to see it, trust it, move through it, and adapt and grow and evolve as a result of it. So, yeah, it's just an ongoing process.
Right. Okay. So let's go to, you got to tell your story a little bit just so people can understand uh, just, why you're doing what you're doing now and what, like just to know, like the movie, I just watched The Portal, watching that and understanding, that was inspired to you after you watched The Secret and, we'll get into that. But I mean, I'm just seeing how you've, you know, turned over the rocks, you're like, I'm going to go into this. And it's just like, it's so cool to listen to somebody who does follow their path and does follow their intuition and does pick up the breadcrumbs and goes and sees where it leads you. And that's what I've watched. And it's just a beautiful, um, it's just an amazing story. So take it to where you want to. I know you probably tell it a lot, but I do think it kind of helps people understand really why you're so passionate about what you do now.
Yeah. I guess I'll start where I finished school, and I grew up in a very beautiful, wholesome country farm with a beautiful, Catholic upbringing, very close family, and everything was really wonderful in my family life and in my school life. And then I decided to take a year off and backpack around the world, and I blew nearly all of my savings and came back with the intention to do a degree in journalism, but I had some time to fill in before the university degree started, and I had no money, so I just applied to all these jobs in the paper. And before long, I was on a massive trading room floor as a broker the same year that Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, started his career in 1987. And it was a substantial amount of money they offered me to just start out. I was only 19 years old, and I wasn't going to tell them, but after 3 months, when uni was about to start, that I was going to leave. I just had 3 months, make some money, and then I'll leave and do
Right.
my degree. But when the 3 month came around, they actually was on a probation period of time as a broker, and then they gave me a big pay rise and a big bonus. And I was like, just bright lights, bushy tail, and really drawn into the glamour and the glitz of that world. So I kept putting year after year my degree off, thinking maybe one more year, maybe one more year. And as the years went on, this was the late 80s, early 90s, I got swept into the culture of that industry, and all of the, I guess, the passion, the morals, the ethics that I kind of was really, brought up with got thrown out the window when next thing I'm in this very decadent, hedonistic world of finance, finance, fast money. So before long, I was doing a lot of drugs, a lot of drinking, a lot of late nights, working really, really hard. And it was fun and exciting. I was given a multiple six-figure salary, sports car, and corporate Amex card. So it seemed really exciting. But the universe is very good at guiding us. And over time, I started to develop a lot of anxiety and panic attacks and insomnia, and this kind of morphed into a really deep, dark depression. And of course, if we ignore symptoms, which is the universe giving us signals to change, if we ignore them, then they don't just go away. They actually just get louder and louder and louder until we listen to that signal or symptom. And so I ignored them and ignored them and ignored them until this blew up really into a very dark time in my life. I was really questioning whether I wanted to go on with life that I was living. I suffered what was technically diagnosed as a nervous breakdown by doctors. And yeah, it's interesting that there's a siren in the background at the same time I'm telling this story.
Right.
And yeah, it was a really difficult time. I was really wondering whether I wanted to go on. I was so dark and full of self-loathing of who I'd become and the life that I was living, but I didn't know any way out. And I was seeing psychiatrists, psychologists, put on pharmaceuticals, really put on suicide watch in many cases. And it was in this time that I came across a documentary about a property developer who was being very successful, and he was very famous at the time in Australia. And interestingly, in a tiny slither of that story, he talked about how he used meditation as a tool for his success and stress management. And it was a particular style of meditation called transcendental meditation. And that word transcending, because I was really into the party scene and the drugs and the drinking. And it really was like an epiphany, a light bulb moment that I just was like, I need this. This is something that's been missing my life. Now, this was in the mid 90s, and we didn't have meditation apps, no internet, anything like that. So I'd never come across meditation in my life, but that was a starting point. I went to the Yellow Pages, picked up the Yellow Pages book, and started ringing all the different meditation centers. And that was the start of my journey into meditation, Eastern philosophy and spirituality. And it was a big turning point. And just to kind of conclude that story, I started meditating every day. It was a game changer. I couldn't believe what it had done to me as far as how much it improved my life. I went back into work, so I was taking mental health leave at that point. And I went back onto that trading room floor, and I started to continue on as a broker for 16 more years and becoming a very successful broker over that time, until eventually I realized it was time for me to, I guess, fulfill a dharma, a life purpose,
Hmm.
and bring this to the world. And it was a very strong passion that I had, and inspiration and motivation and mission and vision to bring this to as many people as possible in the world. And that's when I left to do this full time.
Yeah, amazing. So let's explain what it does, because I feel like I was telling my husband yesterday, I said, "Oh, tomorrow I'm interviewing Tom Cronin from Australia." I said, "I really," because he doesn't meditate, he's goes straight to his computer, and he doesn't have that. And I said, "Oh, I just think I can't wait for you to listen to that episode," basically. And, it's like people like him that if they only knew, what the benefits are, like I was even saying, like, anti-aging, like does something, I was trying to like, give him these little things to, you know, just had to spend that time. I mean, when you talk about your meditation, you're 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon. You're not asking for, a 10-day retreat, right? So will you explain when you're speaking to someone like that just doesn't can't even understand what it did for you, like to see the benefits of that documentary and what it was doing for him that really like sparked it. And then you started going down that path and you're like, oh my gosh, I can even still work in this industry and be at peace and not need to go do the drugs.
Yeah, it's twofold, really, the impact for these deep meditations. And there's many different styles of meditation, so we can get into that at some point. But the deeper meditations where we transcend, that is, go beyond the thinking mind, the feeling body, and the physicality and the locality of where we are and who we are. Because we identify ourselves usually as the thoughts we have, the feelings we have, and the physical form that we have. But that's just a temporary vehicle that we're carrying around in this particular dimension that we're in, to experience smelling roses and jumping off, into the ocean. And so what it does is twofold. When we go into these deep meditations, the first thing we get is an incredible, deep, nourishing, healing rest as we get the body out of the sympathetic nervous system state, which is the stress response or fight flight, and we move it across very quickly into the rest and digest or parasympathetic nervous system or peace response. Now, when we get the body from one state to the other state, everything changes. Physiologically, our body is starting to reorganize and optimize itself as a healing mechanism. And I want you to imagine if we have a broken leg, so we have some damage within the body, physiological damage within the body. If we put a cast around that leg, now the cast is doing absolutely nothing to fix the leg, but what the cast is doing is creating stability, stillness, and then that allows the leg to do what it does really well, which is to heal the broken leg. So the deep rest is very powerful for healing the physical body. It's very powerful for changing the biochemistry in the body. So if we're in sympathetic nervous system or fight flight response, we're going to have high levels of cortisol, adrenaline, or norepinephrine, and we're going to have very low levels of melatonin, serotonin, oxytocin, if any at all, which are the biochemicals that enable us to sleep well, to feel happy, or to feel love and compassion and kindness. And so we can't have those simultaneously happening at the same time. It's one or the other. And most of us, just to operate in the world, in the current climate that we're in, are in the sympathetic nervous system state without us realizing it. That's why we have diminished capabilities of experiencing levels of compassion, love, kindness, sleeping well, or feeling happy, because we've just got a lot of cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine in our bloodstream. So it helps us get into those biochemical states where we just naturally internally start feeling better, regardless of circumstances. And finally, our brain starts to optimize itself. We have this beautiful, large frontal lobe of the brain, which is incredibly intuitive. It's incredibly psychic. It's incredibly creative. But that gets very impaired when we drink a lot of alcohol, or when we're stressed. And obviously when we're asleep, it shuts down completely. So that's why if you have 3 drinks, you can't drive a vehicle, because it's impaired your functionality to make good decisions. And so when we're stressed, we have really impaired brain functionality, and we have to get out of the stress response to open up that frontal lobe of the brain and get us incredibly smart and wise and intuitive. That's why Oprah Winfrey says it's the constancy of stillness where you create your best work and your best life.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are all the things that are happening just simply from sitting in a meditation on a physical, mental, and emotional level. But more importantly, what happens is your brain, which is what you perceive yourself to be. Descartes, the French philosopher, said, "I think, therefore I am." But ultimately, we have more than that. We have the field of intelligence that we get to play with, and that's what's outside the brain. We've got the brain, which is in the skull. We've got an infinite field of intelligence that the brain can access outside of the skull, and that's what I call the field of mind, or the unified field of intelligence. And from there, we can pull incredible creative ideas and impulses that our mind is able to now tap into. And we get that when we transcend the limitations of the thinking mind and access conscious mind itself. And that's a little bit more esoteric, but it's really powerful when we can start to have a mind that's so expansive and tapping into that infinite potential.
Right. So you were describing the transcendental meditation has a mantra.
Yeah,
And
that's
that,
right.
and so, I do a lot of breath work, and I really get to when you explain that, I mean, I was like, when at the beginning of doing it, it's like I craved it, where I know what it felt like when you were explaining that. And so when you're explaining the science of all that, it's like, yes, I feel like all that creativity, and then I go on my walk and I go outside with the dogs, and it's like it wouldn't be the same if I hadn't done that breath work and it's like meditation breath work, right? So I understand that. And then when you're talking about the transcendental with the mantra, I've never done that, but you were explain the difference, because you're saying a mantra for that 20 minutes. And what is that? There's some, yeah, you need to
Mm.
explain what that does in the brain.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Um, so, firstly, breath work can definitely get you into that state of transcendence. Plant medicine, I believe, which I haven't used, but I believe that that is also another portal into a dimension that exists. It's not that it didn't exist and now it does. It's always there. It's just that there's certain entry points into that realm, into that space of um, blissful awareness without thoughts. So transcendental meditation is slightly different from mantra meditation. Mantra meditation is where we repeat the japa beads over and over again and repeat the mantra over and over again, and we never let go of the mantra and never let go of the japa bead. And you might do those mantras 108 times or 1008 times. These are auspicious numbers for mantra repetition. But
And when you say beads,
yeah, these mantra beads, like I've just got some here, these japa beads that usually people wear them, and they have 108 beads to the japa, or 108 japas, and then you would just say the mantra for each bead, and then that gives them the ability to do the auspicious number of 108 mantras or 1008 mantras, whatever their meditation number is going to be.
okay.
But with mantra meditation, that's with the mantra and the japa, and then you really just are deeply attached to the mantra and to the beads, and you're just going through that process. Transcending meditation is a process where we actually get to an experience called transcendence. What that looks like is that the mantra is a mechanism to start the meditation with, to coerce, to inspire, to lure the mind inward, away from the external world, away from the future and the past, away from forms and phenomenon, away from stimuli. The mind won't naturally go into the subtle or subtlest realm beyond thought. We need a vehicle. That's where the mantra comes in, a mind vehicle. Man is mind, and tra, tra, is where we get the word truck or vehicle.
Oh,
And so a mantra is a mind vehicle that takes the mind in the opposite direction than it naturally wants to go. From the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, our mind projects externally in a dualistic experience of subject, object, phenomenon, going from the subject to an object, future, past, or present, that is some degree of stimulation, excitation, and identification. But with the mantra, it takes the mind inward, away from the forms and phenomenon outside of us, into a subtler and subtler realm. And as the mind goes deeper and deeper, what happens is it starts to get awareness and an experience of an incredible blissful state where there's the ability to be conscious and awake and not have a thought. And the
hmm.
mind at this point will spontaneously let go of the mantra, spontaneously let go of thinking and association with the outside world. And what we do is called transcend at that point into a fourth dimension beyond thinking, beyond deep sleep, beyond dream state, which we call turiya, the fourth state, which is I'm now awake and I'm not having a thought. And the big question is, who are you if you're awake and not having a thought? And this is really the existential question that we've got to start exploring as a human species. It's like, who are you when you don't think? Who are you when you don't feel? Who are you when you exist beyond a physical limitation? And this is what's missing in the human experience. It's just not enough of us on the planet. are experiencing Turiya yet. And this is my inspiration, is to bring this meditation to the world.
Mm. So going on there, you were talking about where the world is now. I wrote it down. It is uh, Kaluga, and it's going to
Kali
Satuga.
Yuga.
Kali
Kali
Yuga.
Yuga.
Kali Yuga is where we, where the earth shifts. Now the earth is shifting to
Sat Yuga.
Satu,
Sat
Sat,
Yuga. So
Sat
Yuga,
Yuga. I have it written
yeah,
down right. Satu Yuga. Satuga.
yeah. So Yuga is a epoch of time, a long window of time, roughly 10 to 20,000 years. And Kali is ignorance. So we're in the age of ignorance right now. It's a dark time. We normalize to this time because we don't know anything different. We've only been here for some people 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And so we just normalize to the current climate that we're in. And so the Kali Yuga has been an extended period of time where there's conflict, there's disease, there's famine, there's greed, there's domestic violence, there's drug abuse, there's alcohol abuse, and there's this incredible, insatiable appetite to get things outside of us to make the inside of us better. If I can buy my way or experience my way to a higher state, so that's going to Cancun and drinking pina coladas, or getting the latest dress from Zara, or getting my Bitcoin portfolio bigger, or watching, doom scrolling through Instagram or TikTok. All of these are commoditization and extraction models of fulfillment that we get from the external world. And this is what is the founding premise for the age of the Kali Yuga, the Yuga that we're in right now. And we have a deep code and construct in our society that good things make us feel good and bad things make us feel bad. And we're in this reactive mode, constantly trying to make the external world better so that we feel better on the inside, or avoiding the external world because that's making us feel bad. In Sat Yuga, it's a very different experience. We have people that have realized that their state of fulfillment actually lies within themselves. It's something that they've cultivated through an internal process. And it could be plant medicine, it could be breath work, it could be yoga, qigong, meditation. There's so many different tools, devices, mechanisms that are now seeping into the mainstream as we're in this transition. There's a reason why we now have people accessing all of these modalities in the masses. And that's because we're in this transition as we're slowly, gradually using less ice cream, hot chips, and burgers to be a source of fulfillment, and using more meditation, breath work, and yoga as
Mm-hmm.
a source of getting to fulfillment. And when we see this happen en masse, it's going to be a phenomenally different time, but the world will be in for a shake-up, because things like shopping malls will become less significant, where we have that terrible week at work and we need to buy our way to fulfillment with a bunch of clothes that we just don't need.
Right. When you talk about distraction, you say the world is, I mean, raising children, it's like, that's like, come on now. It drives me crazy with all the social media, the phones that, the girls are 18 and 15. So their whole life, that's all they've known is this technology, and it's only advanced, and the distraction factor is um, huge. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's a real conundrum. And what we want to do is look at the polarity and everything. So shopping malls have a place, because if I do need to buy a new shirt, because all of my shirts now have holes in them and I just simply can't turn up to a business meeting without a shirt. So I need to go to a shopping mall and buy a shirt. And it has a role and a relevance, and it has some capacity to support us, but also has a challenge because it causes addictions and unnecessary expenditure, and it uses up lots of energy. And same with social media. This podcast will be really getting, very few people could access it unless we have the capacity to use social media to let this community know that this podcast exists. And I had one person stand up in one of the screenings of our film, and they asked a question, what do you feel about these terrible, evil social media giants that are ruining our society? And I said, look, I have a question for you. How did you know about this screening tonight? And he's like, I saw a post about it in social media. I said, so the social media itself is just a mechanism to bring information to the world, and it's a really exciting opportunity. And I don't think we can actually get to Sat Yuga without social media. I don't think we can get to Sat Yuga without this digital revolution that we're going through, because we can't convey this information just in books alone, or just in live talks in person alone, like we've done for the last 5,000 years. we need to leverage and scale the opportunity to get information to the masses. And that's why you and I having this podcast with you in San Diego, me in Bondi Beach, Australia.
Mhm.
And so social media plays an integral role in the dissemination of incredibly wise content. We have some of our greatest spiritual leaders in the last few thousand years with social media accounts like Ramana Maharshi, Sri Sri Nandamayi Ma, podcasts like Ram Dass, who doesn't even exist in a physical form anymore, now has a podcast. So it's not that they're bad, it's just that how do we use them? And what's the consciousness of the person that's using that social media? Have they got the discerning and developmental capabilities to compartmentalize their time with that social media, where they use it as a mechanism to elevate and uplift their life, as opposed to a mechanism that destroys their life in some way, shape, or form? And unfortunately for young children, they just haven't developed their mental capacity or discerning capabilities yet. And that's why we do need some form of parental guidance and maybe some regulation and control that comes in to support them. A classic example would be my kids when they were in their teens. They didn't have the maturity or the brain development between the frontal lobe and the rear lobe to make those wise decisions as to when to turn social media off. And so we would take their phone off them and put them on the kitchen bench when it was bedtime and say, look, you know, you'll get that tomorrow morning. And we would come in the morning into the kitchen and see on their phone in the notifications on their screen messages from their peers in group Snapchats at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, when that traditionally in the past kids would be sleeping from 8 o'clock at night till 7 o'clock the next day,
Right.
and having a really solid sleep to nourish them and heal them and grow their body and their brain. But these days it's coming at such impairment, and we're paying a big price for that.
Right. And you describe the dopamine, that's what's they're craving, that addiction is what that phone does to their brain.
Yeah, they're actually designed for that. There's a great TED talk by Tristan Harris, who became a whistleblower for a lot of these social media giants. He was, I think there's also a film out called The Social Connection or something. I can't remember
Yes.
what it's called.
It's not that, but I know what you're talking about because
Something
I did
along
watch
those
it. Yeah.
lines. Yeah. And it's, he was saying that he was the morals and ethics officer at a lot of these companies, and he had to leave because he said that they weren't building these apps with ethics involved. And he said they're building them for addiction.
Hmm.
And that's unfortunately what keeps people's eyeballs on these apps. They're built for selling advertising space, for nothing more than that. And you know, we can use them to our advantage, or they can use us to their advantage. So yeah, it requires a lot, because the incredible level of dopamine that we can get from these apps is quite compelling and challenging.
Right. I mean, just as a parent and watching it, and like right before this interview, my daughter, the one that's still here, the 15-year-old, I have to take her phone. And just exactly what you say, they always have to put it down in the kitchen. But it's that dinging that you hear, that there's some snap thing, and I'm how do you even focus in life? Like, it's a constant, and it's just, I know it's made for that constant go back to see who sent you a message. And my husband and I are like, geez, it's just like, how do you even, it's like constantly, what's on my phone? Ding, ding, ding,
Yeah.
ding, right?
Yeah, I've been doing a coaching program with the Flow Research Collective guys, all about brain optimization and peak performance and flow states. And one thing that they talk a lot about is fortifying the phone and really not letting that phone seep in and hijack your attention, because this is what's been a disaster for the youth of the world. And schools now, particularly in Australia, I don't know if it's happening in America yet, but a lot of schools have banned phones now, because they just found that we had a 10-year window of them just completely decimating children's attention spans. And that's been a big shift for the schools now, to get them back into children just focusing on school when they're at school and not texting people while they're in the classroom. But yeah, we have to firstly educate children to let them know that they are being hijacked. This is not serving them for their highest good. And it's actually going to erode their capacity to feel joyful, to feel fulfilled, to feel creative, to know what boredom actually feels like. They need to
Right.
get to that point of boredom before they start to burst through with creative ideas to go through something else. And unfortunately, we'll look back in time and go, gosh, we had a major problem there, that we didn't really support and nourish and attend to the beautiful youth of the world that are going to be our next leaders.
Right.
They're going to have brains that are decimated with ADHD and all sorts of attention deficit problems. That's just
Right.
going to cause all sorts of problems.
Yeah, I always say, we have no idea what is going to come from this, and it's not. Anyway, let's go to your movie, The Portal. I watched it. And it's interesting because I just came, do you know Bashar, the channel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful.
I had a group of girls. We went to Sedona. So I just
Mm.
got back. And so when I was watching that movie, we were talking a lot about like change your story, change your life kind of thing. Like, you can keep talking about your problems and, it's not even a problem anymore. You can keep making it your problem and keep talking about it, but we said like it doesn't even have to be there. We're in the moment right now. It's like right now new. That whole thing is your story. But when I watched your movie, and each person and their story, and it made me cry at the end. And I was like, what a great way of express, just I don't know. It was touching, and everyone, you can go and find it. You can watch it for free. And he also has his book. So, but will you explain your inspiration and where you were going with why you wanted to share that message?
I guess it was inspired by my own story because my story had a dark night of the soul in it. And then there was alchemy, there was transformation. I went from darkness to light, from lead to gold. And it's not that life becomes perfect, but you can feel and notice that there's an ongoing progression towards a better experience and a better person that evolves through that commitment to an internal journey. And so I really wanted to convey that in a film, that no matter who you've been or what you've been through, there is always the potential for alchemy. There is always the potential for growth and change. Now, we wanted to focus on meditation as the mechanism to inspire and sustain that level of change. But of course, we acknowledge and respect that there are so many different tools and devices that we can use, like yoga and breathwork and plant medicine, as methodologies to help us transform and liberate ourselves from the shackles of that story still playing in our life 10, 15, 20 years later. And it doesn't have to be a life sentence to have had an experience. And we can actually turn liabilities that are challenging experiences in life into assets that are things that we can leverage. So this podcast is an opportunity for me to leverage the dark experience that I went through by telling that story and telling the growth and transformation that happened as a result of that story. And everyone in that film that we chose, all those characters through all those stories, through lots of research and scouring the world for incredible stories that had a dark night of the soul and had this transformation using meditation. All of them have gone through that transformation and have been doing amazing things since then. And that liberation that comes
Mhm.
by realizing that that story isn't there as an impediment to hold you back in life. That story is there as a springboard for you to actually leap forward and do something quite remarkable with it.
Yeah. I just, you know, each story kind of there wasn't one that made more of an impact because you really did great in picking that because, I'm sure there was many to pick from, but I was touched by each one. And I know like, when you realize, when I understood your story and then what kind of motivated you to share like it's so you could probably have done a 12-hour movie, and shared everybody could have a
Mm.
share that has had that black dark night of the soul and what meditation or stillness or whatever they did to overcome that, to ex experience life in this new way, and I feel like, I was like thinking of the black man and just his tears and his song, and when he was singing that song and his mom, and I don't know, it's just like he just touched my heart. And I just, when you see that and you see somebody that can overcome that, and they don't need to keep going back and playing that tape, that old, and she's like, "This is where I am." And when he's singing the song, and I was like, tears, because it's so good. And I just, I'm a person that and I can catch myself when I'm around people that completely tell me their trauma, which I understand we all have to work through that. But when it's on repeat, and I'm just like, okay, so when you talk about it, I'm that way with the girls. It's like, let's talk about what we can be. Let's talk about this amazing possibility that you can transform that. And let's talk about it, what it is now, because that's not even you, that's gone,
Yeah.
right?
And we're choosing those stories. Firstly, we wanted to choose individuals that represented a particular demographic. So we had Amandine from Europe, we had Heather from America, we had Buddha, who's African American, we had Zwei, who's Asian, we had Ronnie, rabbi from Montreal, and really looking at different stories that were going to really cover a broad spectrum. Dr. Doty, obviously wealthy doctor from obviously quite upstanding sort of higher, richer class of citizen. And so really trying to get that diversity so that we could cover everyone. It's like no one's excluded, no matter where
Mhm.
you come from in the world and what class you come, what sort of affluence, what sort of race, what sort of religion. We all can have difficult times, but we can also all change as well. And we wanted to really look at different crises that people went through, like Heather breaking her back, or Dodi losing all his money, or Zwei, being a refugee, Buddha being in the war and having trauma from that, and looking at, Ronnie losing, pretty much the use of his entire body. So we really wanted to cover very diverse genres of people, and backgrounds of people, but also different crises that went through. So hopefully we could get enough people watching it go, well, I can relate to at least one of those
Right.
stories,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
know that they can find a way through that.
Yeah, it just gives you a perspective on life, and that you give your life from it's your perspective. Like someone could watch your movie and say, "Oh my gosh, that was the most amazing life," and you could sit there and say, "Oh my gosh, it was." It's all perspective, and it's just so beautiful to see all those different lives. Okay, so you wrote a book on the 7 states of consciousness, and I
Mm-hmm.
really love how you uh, describe that. And I think I know my listeners will, because I feel like when you do, it kind of shows where we're at in this world right now. Could
Yeah,
you
it's a
do
great
that?
roadmap for us
Yes.
understanding why we're in Kali Yuga and what gets us into Sat Yuga. So it's the
Yes.
microcosm of the macrocosm. The macrocosm is there's this particular period of time that we're in where 99.999% of the world are ignoring 4 of the 7 states of consciousness. And Sat Yuga is where 99.999% of the world have awakened and realized those 7 states of consciousness. And we're sort of in that gradual transition out of the Kali Yuga into the Sat Yuga. And so these 7 states of consciousness that we all have access to, the first 3 that nearly everyone's in, is that they think, and they have deep sleep, and they have dream state. And so thinking state predominantly revolves around the I, the identity, the personality, even though we might have nice thoughts about our kids or someone that we want to help. But generally, most of our thoughts revolve around our desires, our ambitions, our fears, our phobias. Then we have deep sleep, which we go into when we're in an unconscious state of rest. That's when we lie down in bed at night and we lose all muscle control. And then we have dream state, which is where the I re-emerges. So all of our dreams revolve around us again, and we're at the center of every dream. So it's very narcissistic and self-obsessed, of course, like most of the thinking state. And then we go back into thinking. So we move through those 3 states until we start meditating or transcending. And that can be through different modalities, like we've said. It could be through breath work. I found meditation or transcending meditation one of the most effective ways to get into this state where I'm awake and not thinking. So this is what we call Turiya, the 4th state. Turiya means in Sanskrit fourth. And so this is a state beyond deep sleep, dream state, and thinking state, because now I'm awake, but I'm not thinking. I'm not concerned with an I. The I doesn't even exist, but there's just conscious awareness itself. And there's an existence that happens when we're in that deep meditation experience where there's no thoughts in the mind. We're in what we call samadhi. Sama means same, and dhi means intellect. So same intellect. It's not changing. It's just blissfully aware. Ram Dass calls this loving awareness. And then when we integrate Turiya into thinking state, so this is morning and evening, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, going in and out. Eventually, the fourth and the fifth, sorry, the fourth and the fifth state converge into one fifth state, where we now have loving awareness simultaneously with thinking. And so we now have the witnessing of thinking starting to happen as we have this conscious awareness and thinking in the foreground starting to happen simultaneously. Not only is there conscious awareness, but there's this beautiful underrising sort of undercurrent of bliss that arises through the body in this stabilization of this fifth state of consciousness called cosmic consciousness. And then there's two more advanced states that we get into over time, and that's using some more advanced practices, the sixth state of consciousness, where not only do we start to identify a non-changing state of being within inside of us, we start witnessing this beautiful non-changing state of the divine being expressed outside of us as well. We start seeing not just the physical forms of duality from subject object, but we start witnessing the subtler aspect of that reality. Oh, that's God or the source or the divine manifesting through forms in this current real-time experience of observation. And then the seventh state of consciousness is quite an advanced state called unity consciousness, and that's a really advanced state of what we call non-duality, where you have really melted away the remnants of the ego construct and starting to experience yourself more as the unified field. And not many people are in that state on the planet at the moment. It's quite an advanced state to get into.
Right. Do you see that? Like, I mean, we're about the same age. Will we see that in our lifetime? I mean, I know there's people like that, but will we say, "Oh, wow, there's like 20% in that unity consciousness"? Where do you see that?
Definitely not at 20% at the moment. But yeah, will we see it in this lifetime? Probably not 20%. But what's really exciting is we've got a lot of what we call non-dualists, and we'll start seeing non-duality or non-dualism or non-dualists popping up as words, and people teaching how to get into these advanced states. And so people like Muji has an Instagram account as a non-dualist, Adyashanti, Rupert Spira, Richard Sylvester. I've worked with some Zen Buddhist masters that are very much in these advanced states where there's a clearing that takes place. And what prevails is, in Buddhism, they call it emptiness. So what that means is that the vessel is empty of the occupant or the construct known as the ego identity. Some people would question whether we can actually get there as a human. Can we truly be free of the ego construct? And that's something that I'm certainly not in that state. So I still have an ego construct that I identify as Tom. But I do have glimpses into moments of emptiness and moments of clearness of that constraint, and just experiencing a deep, peaceful, prevailing silence and stillness that can be experienced with my eyes open while I'm driving, while I'm walking, while I'm even eating. And it's not that we just definitively go from black to white, or from not being in it or being in it, being dark or light. It's just that it's a gradual transition that can happen. We can oscillate. Sometimes we can go into it and have profound moments in it. And then when you're running late for a plane, all of a sudden you're back fully into ego mode. Oh my goodness, if I don't get this plane,
Right.
I'm going to be, missing that meeting or something. So certain extreme situations will bring us much more back into ego construct and the identity, and more peaceful moments, particularly like retreats or being in a quiet log cabin somewhere in the mountains and clearing our mind of thoughts, will tend to find that we can access these states a lot more, which is why people spend times in monasteries and ashrams in remote places.
Right. People call you Mr. Calm or something, right? There's something about that
The
word.
king of calm.
The what?
King of calm. I
King
was
of
the one
Calm.
introduced on stage. Yeah.
And people say that to me. And I'm going into classrooms now at this little school, and I went and spoke with the parents last night. And I start that school. I already did one school last week. It was amazing. And they're like from 5 years old to 13 years old. So it's a pretty wide range of um, children. But I was telling the parents how, you know, when you're rushing around and, you got to be calm, like they're going to do what you do in the morning. And I taught them a morning routine. And you and I have a similar morning routine. I get up at 4:30, you get up like we do our writing, we do our exercise, we do our breath work, meditation, and then I'm good. And all the parents were raising their hands and saying, "Well, I have these kids and, how do I do that? We're running around." And I said, I can say to this day after I raised my girls that every time they've come downstairs because of my morning routine and all the things that I do, I have always been calm and happy. I have never been a crazy lady. And I feel like that when that is, and then they're like, well, I can't do that. And I said, well, that's your story, right? You can do that. But it's like this, I said, it's just part of like cultivating this muscle of, it's just like, that's how I want to live is in this calm state. And I want the girls to see and they're going to do what I do. Don't you agree?
Yeah, children grow predominantly through osmosis, that is through observation, and by being simply in your presence and company is how they learn how to live their lives more than anything. Of course, they're going to learn Pythagoras' theorem and ancient history and all those sorts of things from school. That's data input. But as far as behavioral patterns, the part of it is genetically coded into them through ancestry, but a lot of it is just morphed into them through being in the company of someone. And if they see an adult that's screaming and yelling at people in the traffic and sticking their finger up at them because they pulled in front of them, they're going to see that that's a normal type of behavior that they would start to think and live and breathe as their way of behaving. And same if they come home and see their dad just chewing down a pizza and drinking cans of beer, watching the footy all weekend, they're going to just think that that's normal behavior as well.
Right.
And a lot of people ask me, and I've got the intention in some school programs and I have worked with some schools. And I do think it's really important that we give the youth of the world these tools at their disposal to help them. But I think the biggest problem we have is we just still have too many stressed parents that,
Mhm.
like you said, with that mother, that they have that kind of code or that belief system that this is who I am, this is how I live my life. If you watch any TV sitcom or TV drama, pretty much you'll see, classic example is Modern Family. We've really conditioned our society to think that running around frantically and being a little bit stupid and silly is actually the way we should live our life because that's the way people on TV live their lives. And so it's
Right.
a really deep code and construct. And look at any TV dramas, it's the same thing going on and on and on, which is like a lot of people just running around very stressed.
Right.
It's hard
You
to
have,
sell a TV drama with lots of people being very calm. It would be very
yeah,
boring.
right. That'd be boring.
In fact, most of the people listening to this will probably fall asleep by now.
No, what I love too on your website is you talk about high school meditation and seniors meditation. And I even think when you look at those two age groups, like I think of the grandparents like meditation, but think of what that would do for their brains, right?
It's phenomenal. Yeah, I've been through just my parents recently passing, but the last few years spending time in aged care facilities and just having an insight into how poorly we, I guess, support and provide opportunities for our aging, community. We've got the bookends of the youth of the world and the
Right.
seniors of the world, and really they're so unsupported with tools and techniques. I couldn't believe the food that they were giving them, the daily activities that they were providing for them, and yet there's such an amazing opportunity to transform and revolutionize aged care in the world, across the world, and how we support older people, because there's so much information that validates the reduction in things like dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, with tools like meditation, breath work. It doesn't take much to teach them. I was only teaching an aged care community the other day, and one lady said, I just felt so much peace.
Mm,
And peace is such a profound state to give people access to. And all that peace is the clearing of noise, the clearing of disturbance. And so by just quieting her mind, and she was really struggling with being in the aged care facility. And obviously, a lot of them struggle with things like low sense of purpose and self-esteem, and obviously lots of regret, shame, and guilt from the life that they've lived or the choices that they've made. So giving them freedom from those two things and just bring them into the present moment and giving them a sense of peace is some of the best things we could do, I think, for the aged care. And it's surprising how hard I've managed to find it to get things like meditation programs into aged care facilities. They're just really not that interested, unfortunately, at this stage.
yeah. I mean, to me, when I think of what I mean, the things that I've even learned from you that, if I would mention it to, like my husband's parents and what that would do, but it's just not part of their, they just aren't, that's not on their radar. They don't,
Yeah,
that's
not on the
not
radar.
part
Yeah.
of, you know,
Mm.
yeah, that would be amazing if I wish my mom would do that. So there, what is the word that, because what the world is going through right now, and was having a conversation, and I don't even talk political, I don't talk all the things, but when I was telling the school last night, parents, I'm like, I'm just going to say right now that all the schools are going to be like this, and we're just going to all this education system that I see my girls in that is so not where the world is going. I see this whole new shift, right? And I know you do too. But what is that word? Is it rash? Something where
Rashi.
rashy. Because I was
Yeah.
trying to remember, I was walking the dogs and I was like, okay, how do I remember that word? Okay, like I have a rash.
A rashi is a Sanskrit word for a cataclysmic event that is a force of evolution to enact change when the resistance to change has been too rigid and too established. So we can have Shiva, which is a force of evolution as well. We call that the destructive operator. So Shiva can come in through your life continuously, time and time again, trying to inspire some form of discomfort well, bringing some form of discomfort to inspire change. And quite often, a classic example, if you have a cold or a flu. So what that will do is that will be some form of mechanism to inspire change, which would be, oh, I need to lie in bed for a couple of days and just change what you're doing because of that discomfort. Now, if we ignore Shiva, then the Rashi comes, and a Rashi is a cataclysmic event that makes change. It makes change basically imminent. It makes change something that has to happen.
Got it. I was just looking at my time because I didn't want to. Oh, so where do you see this world like in going? Do you feel like, I mean, I've interviewed people the last 10, and there's so many similarities in what they say. And because you're in Australia, so what I'm going through in the United States is so different,
Yeah,
right?
it's definitely extreme where you are. We have some degree of sort of extremity, but I see the world really moving closer and closer to a fork in the road, which is a breakdown, a breakthrough. It looks like if we don't adapt and change spontaneously, of our own accord, voluntarily, then the universe will organize that for us. And it will happen in your personal life, it will happen in your relationship, it will happen in your business, it will happen in the civilization. If we continue doing the same thing over and over again, expecting things to be better, then we're just sticking our head in the sand. And so we thought that the pandemic was particularly a rashi, but what we found when people came out of the pandemic was extreme levels of indulgence and decadence and hedonism, even more so than before. We've traveled across the world more than we've ever traveled. We started buying our way into fulfillment more than we've ever done with online shopping. So it wasn't the cue, the catalyst for change that we thought it might have been.
Right.
So that just means that the bigger one needs to come at some other point in time. And it could be environmental, it could be nuclear, it could be AI. So we can avoid a rashi, but if we don't wake up sooner rather than later, then it will seem like we might need some quite extreme event to make us really, really significantly change as a planet, as a species.
Hmm.
Hopefully, we can adapt and change much more fluidly and smoothly before that happens. And people like you doing what you're doing with these podcasts and getting this message out, and hopefully, lots of people get inspired to meditate and do more inner work and relieve themselves of the trauma and the pains and sufferings of the past, then that might prevent having that global cosmic sort of rashi that happens on the planet.
Yeah. Oh, it's been so great, Tom. We're at the end, but I want you to share where people can find you, your website, tomcronin.com, watch the movie, The
Yeah,
Portal.
come to Instagram. I love to hear from people on Instagram. I respond to all my messages. So Tom Cronin on Instagram is a good place to find me as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Been such a pleasure learning from you.
It's been great to be here. Thanks for everyone for tuning in today and for sharing space. And look forward to hearing from you at some point in the future.
Thank you.